Welcome back. It's a big game breakdown for Ohio State, Texas. Doug Lamreese and Bill Landis. Bill, you and I have been doing these things for a while. Could there be a better game to do this for, to break down both sides of the ball than the Buckeyes and Longhorns?
No, in fact, not only have we done breakdowns like this before, we've broken down this game not that long ago. This is these are the kind of games we live for when we do our deep dives into previewing them.
Yeah, we could just refer people back to that. See old preview.
Could, yeah.
We will make picks at the end of this for Ohio State, Texas. We won't do a big game breakdown for every single Ohio State game this year, but we were kind of going through it, Bill. If Ohio State's favored by 40, we're not going to do it. We're going to do tons of content. We're not going to do this. If the opponent is interesting, even if Ohio State's favored by 14 or 17 or 20, if they're interesting and they're worth breaking down, it could be a reasonably competitive game. I think we'll do this, which I think we think that means we'll do this 6, 7, 8 times during a 12-game regular season.
Yeah, at least half the year, I would think, just looking at the schedule. There might be a couple we maybe would reach and it doesn't quite fit that category, but we might think the opponent's interesting, or maybe we just think there's something interesting to dive into Ohio State wise that would give us a reason to do it too. But yeah, I mean, this game clearly, like Penn State, Michigan, obviously, probably like Minnesota, Illinois, like there's a lot on the schedule. I think we could give this treatment to.
Friday pod and show, expect our college football playoff predictions, our national title picks, our Heisman picks, and we picked 6 other games, the biggest games around the country in the Big Ten that we're also going to make picks for. And that will probably be, we'll have a show we anticipate on Fridays where we go a little beyond Ohio State, Bill, and we delve into, we have that knowledge right now with what we've been doing. We have that knowledge. We want to share it. We think Ohio State fans and other fans who may be here do care about that. So we'll expect that on Friday. And I think on Thursday, we'll expect more of this. And again, just a heads up, we're continuing to get a YouTube channel ready. We're continuing to get outside podcast feeds ready. Those should be done soon, correct? Chief Content Officer Bill Landis.
Yeah, hopefully by next week. Like really hoping YouTube by Saturday in time for the post-game show will alert you guys either way where exactly that will be, and then hopefully by this time next week at the latest we'll have everything else set up.
Live Saturday post-game show, either here on Substack for free for everybody or on YouTube for everybody. You will be at Ohio Stadium. I will be here in the home office. Sunday sound off. We'll get comments, reactions, questions from our Subtext subscribers, and that will be a premium show for the paid Substack subscribers only. And again, most of the time, this is a deeper dive. Most of the deeper dive shows will be premium shows for the paid Substack audience. The stuff where we're still bringing insight, having a good time, but maybe it's more like 15, 20, 30 minutes daily. We just want to keep up with everything. That's what you'll find on YouTube and on podcast feeds. We like to do the mix, but that's kind of how we're thinking of it.
Yeah, and I think for people listening to this who are subscribers, the hope is that you'll be able to get the audio of the premium shows on your subs or your Spotify's, Apple's, whatever. I'm pretty sure we can do that, but again, that's another thing we've yet to set up, but hope to have set up by next week.
Ohio State content, we know how to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Logistics of building all this stuff up it takes a little longer. We need a little help, but we're in good shape.
We're learning.
It takes a little time. We also put some time into breaking down Ohio State and Texas. Picks at the end. I think I know what I'm going to pick, but we broke this up. I did Ohio State offense versus Texas defense. You did Texas offense versus Ohio State defense. It's not that I know zero about that side of the matchup, but what you say is going to influence me, Bill, as I think about this game. So how about if I go first? And then that way I can just get my homework out of the way, and then I can cheat off your paper for the last half of the show.
Sounds good. Yeah, that works for me.
All right, so let's talk about the Ohio State offense versus the Texas defense. We'll go about 20 to 30 minutes on each side of the ball here, and we'll make our picks. Texas has 9 of their top 15 guys in defensive snaps back from last year. So there's a lot of comparisons, Bill, and I know you've pushed back on it some, I think, that there is, do you believe there to be an outside perception that Ohio State lost everybody and Texas didn't?
Yes.
And maybe you believe, what do you believe to be the accurate reflection of how similar or different these two teams are from a year ago?
I think they're different teams, but they're similarly different, if that makes sense. Like they have they Ohio State lost 14 draft picks, Texas lost 12. Texas's draft picks slanted a little more heavily toward the offense. Ohio State's draft picks slanted more heavily toward the defense. So those respective sides of the ball are being remade a little more than the others, but they're also both not really reloading via the portal for the most part here and there. What we can talk about that a little bit, but it's a lot of in-house backfilling with guys that they've recruited and developed. And I don't know why, but for some, I mean, I think the reason is just like Ohio State. Again, I think I said this. Ohio State won the national championship, and there's just a natural expectation of a step back from doing that again because repeating is hard. But the only real difference I think between these two teams' off seasons is that Texas lost in the semifinal and Ohio State didn't and won the national championship. So people think about them differently. I actually think the rosters are in pretty similar positions.
And I think part of it is the idea last year was all these Ohio State guys stayed for this final run.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that wasn't the storyline of Texas as much. So then, hey, all these guys who stayed, now all those guys left, but it just wasn't as much it wasn't the tale of the Texas season the way it was for Ohio State. One of the places where a team has reloaded through the portal is at defensive tackle for Texas. And I want to start with the Texas defensive line and the Ohio State offensive line, because as you said, Texas lost 12 draft picks, 7 of them on offense, 5 on defense. The guys they lost to the draft on defense in the draft: first round cornerback Jahdae Barron, Thorpe Award winner, arguably the best cornerback in the country. Second round defensive tackle Alfred Collins. Second round safety Andrew Makuba. Third round defensive tackle Vernon Broughton. And fourth round defensive end Baron Sorrell. So they lost 3 draft picks on the defensive line. They've brought in 4 defensive tackles in the portal, and they seem okay there, but they're not as good there. Hero Kanu from Ohio State, Cole Brevard from Purdue, Murad Watson from Syracuse, Travis Shaw from North Carolina, and then Alex January is the in-house guy. It feels like they're going to play 5 at those 2 defensive tackle spots. And it also feels like people just reading, we're not there. Reading and listening to people who cover Texas, and all the people on the ground on both sides of the ball are so valuable for everybody to learn about this. Hero Kanu, the Ohio State transfer, was a starter from day one of camp. Like, people were talking, he won this job in the offseason. And I think for a lot of people in Texas, Hero Kanu has been one of the revelations of the offseason for Texas. And he feels like their starter at 3-tech, the guy who's going to make a difference on the interior defensive line. And Bill, if Hero Kanu was still at Ohio State, what do you think he would be?
He would be the backup 3-tech to Edric Houston.
Because when you listen to Texas people talk about it, there seems to be a perception of, man, Texas really reloaded on the defensive line. They're good to go. They're 5 or 6 deep at tackle, and Ohio State might only be 3 deep at defensive tackle. And what are they going to do? And I'm not sure in the depth conversation that's wrong. But if we were having a draft of draft defensive tackles, Edric Houston would be the number 1 pick, no doubt about it. And Caden McDonald might be the number 2 pick. And
I think he would be. Yeah.
I think it's a little odd. And it's just how college football works. But Texas is viewing it as they stole Hero Kanu from Ohio State. And what a coup. And holy moly. And Hero Kanu last year, like, barely played, and good luck to him and the guys who, Carson Hinsman and all the guys who know him really well, they're joking about it. He's a great guy. Good luck to him. But it did not blow a hole in the Ohio State defensive line to use him. And I find some of it from the Texas side to be odd.
Yeah, I mean, that's just how it works with the transfer portal. It's like things people don't take into account with the transfer portal is like, is the transfer portal actually good? And I think there's a lot of people that would tell you that this particular cycle wasn't that good. And then, like, what was this guy before? Like, I understand that he was on a Power 5 program, but like, what was he doing there before before he came to play for you? And I'm not like, I like Hero Canoe. Like, I remember the Wisconsin game in 2023. He made a couple of plays where I was like, whoa, this guy's ready to play, and it just like never really hit from there. And the other guys that Texas brought in, I think are good players, but I'm nervous anytime any team remakes an entire position group via the portal, and that is what Texas is doing here. Um, so they could be fine. They could be good even by like midseason or toward the end of the year. I just don't know that I'm feeling or would be feeling so overly confident about like Ohio State backup, Purdue starter, a UNC starter, and a Syracuse a guy who like was kind of a starter last year. So
Yeah.
so I don't know. I look at that middle of the defensive line for Texas, and I certainly have some serious questions about what that is going to look like in game one.
Alfred Collins and Vernon Broughton, the two defensive tackle draft picks last year by PFF Power Conference defensive tackles. They were rated number 4 and 5 in the nation. Mason Graham was number 1 from Michigan. So it's like one of those things. Are the PFF grades the end all be all? No, they are not. Are they a snapshot of who's pretty darn good? Yeah, I think often it's a good way to do that. These were they were among the best defensive tackles in the country. And that was a storyline going into Ohio State, Texas last year, was it not?
Mm-hmm. It was. And they also, so Texas is on this run now of going to the playoff 2 years in a row. In 2023, they had 2 of the best defensive tackles in the country too. So this is whatever this
even
group
better,
of transfers.
even better.
Yeah,
Those
even
guys,
better,
like,
better. Yeah, better.
They've been slowly getting worse at defensive tackle over the last 3 seasons.
This is the worst they've been, and I think by a significant margin. Doesn't mean they'll be bad, but the bar is pretty high, and this group is just not as good as Texas has had the last 2 years.
So it feels like Hero Canoe and Cole. Is it Brevard or Brevard? Do you know the Purdue guy?
Actually, I thought it was Brevard, but I also just like saying things the fancy way.
You know, I do as well. Yeah. There's a tennis player in the U.S. Open. I think you say her last name, Raducanu, but I want to call her Raducanu. She's just a Raducanu to me. So Cole Brevard is 6'3", 346 as a guy in the middle to clog stuff up. So that'll be something to deal with. They feel like Canoe's a little more of the guy who can be disruptive in there. Murad Watson was a freshman All-American at Syracuse. And again, like we knew about him. He was a big deal. He was a big loss for Syracuse. But Fran Brown, the head coach, in telling stories about that, Murad Watson came to him apparently and said, like, this is what Texas is offering me. And Fran Brown was like, they're offering you what? You got to go, man. Go get that money. Like, we can't offer you that. But I don't. Brown. It doesn't feel like Murad Watson's going to start, which is okay. Travis Shaw is another guy kind of on the nose, and they'll have different looks. Sometimes they'll play more of a guy on the nose. Sometimes they'll play 2 more traditional defensive tackles. It depends what they're doing with the edge guys, who's standing up, who's hand on the ground. But they're probably going to play 5. But I don't know that there's anybody in those 5s who's going to like blow up the game. So I think my theory of the case on the battle between the Ohio State offensive line and the Texas defensive line is that Austin Saraveld and Phillip Daniels at tackle have to survive so Luke Montgomery, Carson Hinsman, and Tegra Shabola on the inside can do work. Because I think Ohio State has an advantage with the interior offensive line against the interior Texas defensive line. And one of the bigger plays of the game last year, you referred to Tegra Shabola as a bulldozer in something we were doing this week. The 4th and 2 QB power on the go-ahead Ohio State touchdown drive, Tegra Shabola blocked down and caved in Vernon Broughton and turned him out of the hole and created the crease for Will Howard, and then Josh Fryer went up to the second level and got the linebacker, and that's where Will Howard ran, and he would have run for a touchdown if the turf monster didn't get him. But it was a bulldozer moment against a draft pick. And if you're not a subscriber, paid subscriber on Substack, you missed our draft of the 22 most important Buckeyes that we did on Wednesday. We certainly would direct you to that. Spoiler alert, Tegra Shabola did not get drafted.
Correct.
I have since that draft, I'm not regretting that we didn't take him in the top 22. Could this be a Tegra Shabola game? Follow the bulldozer against this new look Texas defensive interior and let Tegra Shabola do work?
Yeah, I think I kind of think it should be, right. I think a lot of people are eager to see Tegra kind of take that next step, and that would involve, I think, you know, showing dominantly in this game against Texas with their remade defensive tackle position. And I think like you combine his power with the athleticism of the other two guys on the interior, and I agree that it should be an advantage for Ohio State, because I just don't know. I would be like super worried, and we can talk about the edges for Texas in a second. I'd be super worried if we were going into this game for Ohio State and there was just a menace in the middle of that defensive line that was going to be a load to handle and just like in Julian Sayin's grill the whole game. But I
Yes.
don't see that happening with this group of tackles and what I think is out there for Ohio State's interior offensive line this year.
Yeah, I don't think the pocket's going to be caving in from the inside all game.
Yeah.
That's not a storyline of this. And frankly, that's one of the things Ohio State, I mean, everybody has struggles with it, but like one of the reasons Michigan's beaten Ohio State lately is because their defensive tackles have dominated the game. Mm-hmm. So I don't think that's going to happen here. Just again on Hero Canoe, and this is not about Hero. This is about the way Texas is perceiving it. There's a quote from somewhere that I read. I think it was maybe one of his teammates, Texas teammates, who said it. Somebody's making a big deal about Canoe having championship experience. Quote, he knows what it's like to have confetti fall on him. Mm. He played 7 snaps in the championship game, and he played 33 total snaps in the last 5 games of the year, the Michigan game and the playoff run. So again, we're just saying, it's like if you've heard the perception of Texas is good to go at defensive tackle and Ohio State is lacking, I'm not sure that's right. Now, they got to survive on the edge. Colin Simmons was their number 3 guy in snaps on the edge last year, but he was a freshman All-American. You see what this is. And he was a stand-up pass rusher a year ago. He was usually standing up. He played like 450 snaps. They're two biggest defensive ends played 650 defensive snaps. So he's going to play more. They've also been working with him on having his hand on the ground. So he's not going to be standing up the whole time. He's got to be a more complete defensive end. He's been saying that he would like to break the Texas single season sack mark this year. Do you know what the Texas single season sack mark is? Apparently.
I don't. Is it
22 and a half?
Ooh, who did it?
Some guy I never heard of in the 80s.
Okay.
Maybe they counted sacks differently back then. So that's where Colin Simmons is. Colin Simmons is viewed as one of the 10 best players in college football. He is supremely confident. He is supremely talented. And one of the other things, Alan Clark, former Ohio State assistant defensive line coach, now is at Texas, went there this offseason to coach defensive ends. He's getting them in the toolbox a little bit. So this is a guy who I think production last year, I mean, it clearly was there. I think it had 9 sacks or something last year. Mm-hmm. I think if you only go by the production last year, like the down to down impact, I think he flashed. I think it can be a little bit of like, okay, down to down was it? But there's a leap. There's a leap coming, and the beginning of the leap might be on Saturday. How concerned should Ohio State fans be about what Colin Simmons might do to this game?
I think he very well could. Maybe you can say even confident, like he will be the best defensive lineman Ohio State plays this year. So, I don't concerned. Sure, like on alert, definitely. 2 new starting tackles. Austin Saravel's never played tackle in a game. I don't think he's seen anything quite like Colin Simmons. Philip Daniels did start a little bit last year, but I'm not sure that he saw. He practiced against Jaw Joyner at Minnesota, I guess. Mm-hmm. Who's a good pass rusher, but this will be a new experience for both of those guys, and it's not just Colin Simmons, but he's exceptional, and I think he's going to make that leap too. So he was a true freshman last year, so I think he's absolutely going to think about what Chase Young was as a freshman, and then what he became as a sophomore and a junior, and I think Colin Simmons is on a similar path. So that could be what you're dealing with on Saturday.
Ethan Burke, Colton Vasek also play edge. They have a transfer from Arkansas named Brad Spence, who was a linebacker at Arkansas, but who they've put at edge. So those are the guys you'll see in the game. Austin Saraville and Philip Daniels are just so vital to this game and everything Ohio State's going to do this year. One of the things I'll sprinkle it in here. By the end of this, my conclusion is going to be about origin stories on this side of the ball. And Austin Sareveld on Wednesday was asked about, for instance, Donovan Jackson sliding out from guard to tackle for the first time when he did that against Penn State, and Abdul Carter getting him a couple times, right? It was actually like, I don't think Donovan Jackson got dominated every snap in that game, but there were flashes where the guy who was the future number 2 pick in the draft beat the guy who was moving out the tackle for the first time. But Austin Sareveld was saying that was much harder for Donovan Jackson because he only had a week to do it. Austin Sareveld's had an entire offseason, and that was at Penn State. So Donovan Jackson was trying to like hear the snap count and do all these things. And Austin Sareveld said, it'll just be much easier for me in this particular matchup at home. So if you're trying to compare that, I think that's a valid point by Austin Sareveld. At least he's going to have that on his side. More time, not fighting the crowd. But then the thing that I think is a worthy comparison is the first time Taylor Decker, who turned into a first-round pick as a tackle, the first time he started a game at tackle for Ohio State, Khalil Mack tore his arms off. And that was a game against Buffalo when people weren't exactly sure what Khalil Mack was going to become, which is an NFL Pro Football Hall of Famer. He had 9 tackles and 2.5 sacks in that game. He also had a pick 6 when he was actually going against Jack Mewhort. Jack Mewhort was a left tackle, and Mewhort tried to cut him on like a little bubble screen and just like bounced off his knees. And Braxton Miller hit Khalil Mack in the hands, and he ran it back and was like, what is this guy? My point, I'll make my point now about origin stories. Most people's origins, when you watch a superhero origin story, the origin story is not, I did something and I was immediately awesome. Everybody's origin story is about overcoming. And that first game for Taylor Decker became a primary part of his legacy at Ohio State. And oh, by the way, what was Taylor Decker's legacy at Ohio State? National champion, first round draft pick, great all-time Buckeye, his first start, right? Yeah. All-American, his first start at tackle against a future first round NFL draft pick didn't go great. I think that's going to happen on Saturday. I think Austin Sareveld's story is amazing. I think Phillip Daniels being a dog, amazing. I think they will be 2 very good tackles for Ohio State. I'm not sure how it's going to go on Saturday against Colin Simmons.
Yeah, Ohio State's going to have to help them, I think, which is fine. That's like good football. That's why you're going to see a lot of tight ends in this game, because I think you're going to have someone in line with his hand down next to Austin Sareveld or Phillip Daniels on every snap, helping chip on Colin Simmons. Or I don't know if any of the other like hand on the ground pass rushers worry you the same way. So we're probably just helping on Colin Simmons. So. But you have to account for Anthony Hill at linebacker coming up, and you have to account for Trey Moore. Those are the 3 most dangerous pass rushers on the edge, and Hill and Moore will be coming from depth, which is a little more difficult to manage. But I remember a play from last year's Cotton Bowl where Texas did a thing where like they had 4 down linemen, they ran Anthony Hill up to the line of scrimmage right before the snap. He rushed, and then the ending on the other side dropped out, and like they try to confuse you that way. But on that particular play, when Hill rushed, he just like ran in the Will Kasmerick. And it was like he didn't get there because the tight end chipped him on his way out to run a route. So I think you'll see a lot of that on Saturday. There are ways to try to neutralize a player like a Colin Simmons or Hill or Moore if it ends up being them. But you can't stop them on every play. So I fully expect Colin Simmons, who I don't think did he have a sack? He had a couple pressures. He did not have a sack last year. I think he'll have a sack or 2 in this game for sure.
So Texas last year blitzed Will Howard a third of the snaps, and Will Howard was actually better against the blitz than he was. It felt like mostly what they wanted to do last year. You've watched this game 4 times, is try to get 4-man pressure and then drop into zone.
Yeah, they played hard. They played like no man. I think there were like 3 snaps of man the whole game. It was all zone. It was a lot of split safeties and a lot of not even blitzes really, because it's hard sometimes on PFF. I think sometimes like a blitz means you're bringing more than 4.
Yes.
And I don't think Texas was bringing more than 4 all that often, but they were doing a lot of stuff where they would, bring a linebacker and drop a lineman, bring a safety and drop a lineman kind of stuff. So it's still hard to handle. But and Ohio State, I thought was like a little bit of a mixed bag handling it. But they're going to see a lot of that. Like that's kind of what Texas does.
That's what you expect, right?
Yeah. They're like a bend but don't break, like classic style of defense. They're not going to blitz like crazy and make themselves vulnerable to big plays, but they are going to try to confuse you up front.
And then that opens the opportunity. There was, obviously a big deal made about Ohio State's penalties last year. But if you make a team work and move down the field, Will Howard was 0 of 2 on deep balls of throws 20 yards or more down the field. There was nothing there, although there's a point I want to make on that. But then that opened, okay, oh, you got a first down. Oh, you got a first down. Now Trevion Henderson got a 15-yard penalty and you're backed up. Oh, you got a first down. Now Josh Fryer flinched and now you're backed up, right? It just, you have to be perfect. And Ohio State, on some level, Ryan Day's talked about it a lot. It's almost like, all I have to do is cut out the penalties. Like the only real drive killer last year for Ohio State, and we'll run through their drives real quick, was the Trevion Henderson on Sportsmanlike that really killed them. All the other stuff was pretty normal because even Austin Sareveld got it on Sportsmanlike, but it just knocked them back in yardage. It still created a first and 10. It didn't create a first and 25, and then they gave up a sack on first down. So, and then everything else was just football. It's like, oh, did your tackle flinch because there was a guy breathing down his neck on top of him? Yeah, that's just football.
Mm-hmm.
So, but one of the keys to the game, I think you could argue it's the most important play of the game. When Ohio State was 14-14 and got the ball back on their own 12-yard line and on what would become the 88-yard go-ahead touchdown drive. On first down, they had 12 personnel. They max protected. Texas brought 4. Ohio State blocked with 7. And they still got a little bit in Will Howard's face, but there was really only G. Scott, Jeremiah Smith, and Emeka Egbuka in the route. Smith was in the slot and ran down the middle of the field, and the 2 high safeties both were on Jeremiah Smith. And Emeka Egbuka in motion ended up on the opposite corner, opposite Barron, the first-round pick, and ran a double move. And as he broke out into the second move, the corner panicked and grabbed him. And Will Howard threw it. And it was a 15-yard pass interference penalty that jump-started that drive. And I think it's the most important play. I mean, you're backed up in your own territory, 1st and 12. 1st and 10 at the 12. You're willing to take a shot, even though it hasn't worked. You scheme something up to make sure your quarterback has enough time, and then you put it on your receiver. You know it's going to Egbuka there because there's only 3 guys in the route. And you know they're going to double couple Jeremiah Smith. Emeka Egbuka has to do something there. And he did. And there's going to be moments like that, Bill, where Ohio State's going to protect. They're going to keep extra guys in to protect. Texas is going to lean towards Jeremiah Smith. And then somebody's going to have to find a soft spot in a zone, make a play on a corner, run a great route to create opportunity. And Carnell Tate did a great job finding soft spots in the zone last year. Emeka Egbuka on that play. That is so critical to what's going to happen. But that's how if I'm caught up in Colin Simmons, to your point, that's how you neutralize it. You keep in an extra guy, and then you put it on your receivers to win.
Yeah, and I think so. Like Malik Muhammad's back at corner for Texas, right? He was the other corner opposite Jahdae Barron last year. Michael Taffy's back at safety.
Yes.
Like there's some pieces back in the secondary. They're moving. Was it Gilbo? They're moving him from nickel to outside, right? So maybe that's an area you can exploit. I don't know. They didn't if I recall correctly, they didn't follow Jeremiah Smith with Jahdae Barron last year.
They didn't. They played mostly boundary and field, and they didn't follow.
So I don't think they don't have anybody as good as Barron. So I don't think they do it this year either. So it's going to be, you're going to have to divert resources to pass protection for sure, no doubt. But there should be opportunities for Carnell Tate and Brandon Inniss, and let's have a Max Clare conversation. I really think he's the one that might be able to most take advantage of what's going to be out there, assuming Texas chooses to defend Jeremiah Smith the same way they defended him last year.
I agree. Let's go to the secondary since we're heading there anyway. Michael Taff, former walk-on, great player. He's back. Andrew Makuba was 2nd-round pick, Clemson transfer, was the safety who more often than not was kind of hanging over Jeremiah Smith as a second defender. So there are a lot of situations last year where they're hanging 2 guys on Jeremiah Smith. You just watch it, right? He's often that X receiver guy on one side of the field by himself, and then you'd have the other two receivers and the tight end on the other side. And usually how Texas would defend that is they'd be 2-on-1 on Jeremiah Smith, and then they'd be 4-on-3 for the other side of the ball. And often when it was the 2-on-1, it's a first-round pick and a second-round pick on Jeremiah Smith. So that will stay the same, but it's not a first-round pick and a second-round pick who are the guys that Jeremiah Smith's going to have to deal with. And also they'll probably move them around a little bit more. But, right, you watched that game 4 times. That was basically the idea.
Yeah, there was just like almost always someone underneath him and someone above him. Like I actually there were certainly a few moments where I felt like Will Howard could have tried to get the ball to Jeremiah Smith a little more. And I wonder if there'll be any conversation with Julian Sayin. It's interesting because I don't know. Like the veteran quarterback was a little hesitant to throw it there. So like, will the redshirt freshman let it rip maybe into some cloudy stuff just to try to get Jeremiah Smith the ball? I don't know. You can't be reckless, right? Because like that Will Howard interception was reckless, but in the
Yes.
Cotton Bowl. But I don't. It felt like they kind of just threw their hands up at a certain point and just said like, okay, we're not going to try to get him the ball anymore. And I don't know that's the right way to do it either. So I'm interested to see how aggressive they choose to be, making sure the ball goes his way. But yeah, they'll move him some too. I'm sure they'll get him a touch or two in the run game. I think like a prediction of mine for this game would be like the first play is going to Jeremiah just to try to prove a point after last year when he only had one touch. So there are things they can do. We've seen Ohio State do it before with Marvin Harrison, and even there was so much talk going into 2022 about all the different ways they were going to use Jackson Smith and Jigba coming off of his monster season that he just like never got to do because Jackson got hurt against Notre Dame and didn't really get back on the field again. They're not the same player, he and Jeremiah Smith, but Jeremiah is athletic enough to basically do anything on a football field. So like, I wonder if you might see Jeremiah Smith in the backfield and running routes out of there to see if you can get them matched up on safeties and maybe even linebackers. So they've had a lot of time to think about it, and they've had a lot of time to kind of stew on the fact that he didn't get enough touches in the Cotton Bowl. So I'm sure they'll rectify it on Saturday.
I'm very curious. Chip Kelly did a good job last year, and it happened a couple times in the Texas game with using some run game ingenuity, and they worked Emeka Egbuka into that. They ran like an end around with Travion Henderson that really worked. It split out wide and then came in motion. They handed it to him. Egbuka that was a great role for Emeka Egbuka last year, right? Yeah. Who's that this year? Because I do think, and Chip Kelly's run game ingenuity was a big part of last year. So you had a play caller who was good at it and a wrinkle guy who could execute it. How much do you expect to see that this year? Who's it with, and how important might it be?
I think it's Brandon Inniss.
Okay.
I think Brandon Inniss does a lot of the same stuff in the run game that Emeka Egbuka did or could do. They're built sort of similarly too. Like kind of like I think Brandon Inniss is like almost built more like a running back than he is a receiver. So I think you'll see him there more like a lot of the things where it's like bring Emeka Egbuka in motion thinking he was going to block, and then he would just like release upfield and then throw him the ball kind of thing. Like I think you can do that kind of stuff with Brandon Inniss. You can do it with Jeremiah Smith too, I think, but that is the role that I envision for Inniss for sure.
Okay, so just running through the Texas secondary really quick. As you said, Muhammad graduates from the number 2 corner to the number 1 corner. I think he'll be on the boundary a lot. He actually, other than getting beat by Egbuka on that play, I think he played pretty well against Texas. And then to your point, this is where I think the opportunity for Ohio State to take advantage of somebody could come. It is that opposite corner spot where Jalen Gilbo was the slot corner last year. He barely played any snaps outside last year, but he's going to be the outside corner. He's going to be the second outside corner in this game. And they have a younger guy named Kobe Black, who's a second-year player, was a 5-star recruit. He's probably their third outside corner. It doesn't feel like he'll be the guy on Saturday, though I've heard Texas people talk about they think maybe by the end of the year he'll take that job from Gilbo. So if you have a veteran moving out from the slot who maybe is going to get passed by a young 5-star recruit, but that's the guy who's on the field now, watch that matchup. I think Ohio State wants to throw at Gilbo, yes?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. And I don't know. I mean, I guess if they're going to play it straight up and not follow, like you could get Jeremiah Smith in those spots too, I think.
Yes.
But yes, I think Muhammad's a pretty good corner. And Gilbo, I just don't know. Texas made a similar move with Barron. Barron was a nickel before he moved outside because I remember at Cotton Bowl Media Day last year, like listening to him talk a little bit about that transition. And it could work out fine for Gilbo. I just don't think he's quite the same kind of player. So I would
Okay.
very much be attacking that spot if I were Ohio State.
He's number 3. So when you're watching the game, if you see a situation where it looks like Ohio State has done something in the formation or schematically to get Jeremiah Smith on number 3, that's go time, I think.
Yeah.
The slot, they're probably going to play 2 guys in the slot. One is Jelani McDonald, who everybody at Texas seems to think is a really good player. He can play safety or nickel. He's their bigger nickel. So especially if Ohio State's in 12 personnel, I think McDonald might be the guy who winds up covering Max Clare a lot. But then they have a guy, a 5-star freshman named Grayson Littleton, who's their other slot with a number 65, or borderline 5-star, number 65 recruit in the country, true freshman. He's probably the guy who would wind up on Innis more. So if Ohio State, but the McDonald-Clare matchup could be a really big deal because I think they believe McDonald's physical enough that if they play him in the game as a nickel, he can still help in the run, that kind of thing. So if Ohio State's in 12 personnel to try to free Clare up, the McDonald-Clare thing could be huge. So I think that is and I think it's a matchup that McDonald's really good, but I think Max Clare is going to win a lot of matchups this year. Yes.
He is going to win a lot of matchups this year. Yeah. That might be, not to put too fine a point on it, that could be like where the game is won for Ohio State, I think.
Yeah. And then the other guy, so Taft's the one safety, then the free safety is Derek Williams Jr., who got hurt against Oklahoma last year. But he actually was kind of starting ahead of Makuba last year at the beginning of the season. So he's a veteran. He's played, but like he's been hurt. So he's had a really good camp. Steve Sarkisian was saying like he had a really good last scrimmage and that kind of thing. But those two, the two safeties are so important because they get wrapped up in they're the Jeremiah Smith help. And so there's going to be at least a play where like there's a ball in the air and Jeremiah Smith is going up against against Derek Williams Jr. and like who makes a play on the ball in the air. And so Makuba again was a 2nd-round pick doing that kind of stuff last year. Like I think they're okay with Williams, but just losing Barron and Makuba is a big deal.
Yeah, it's their 2 best defensive backs, right? They returned some starters, but they lost their 2 best, which is I think important to keep in mind. Yeah.
And then McDonald's 6'2", 200. So he's again a little bit of a bigger physical matchup. So again, McDonald-Clare is a huge thing. And then the linebackers, as we said, Trey Moore was actually an edge last year. They moved into Sam linebacker, so he's going to be involved coming in off the edge from a linebacker position. And then Anthony Hill is probably the best linebacker in the country, although he's behind Sonny Styles on Dane Brugler's draft rankings at linebacker for the Athletics. So it's just a reminder that like Sonny Styles is an excellent player too. So as you already mentioned, those 2 linebackers will come off the edge at times and create problems. But in the run game, when it comes to these guys, the very first play of the game last year, Ohio State handed the ball to Quinshon Judkins and he got hit in the backfield and broke the tackle and then gained a couple yards. And I just watched that and thought, okay, I think Ohio State running backs are going to get hit in the backfield a few times, and I wonder what happens. And this is where James Peoples and CJ Donaldson, I said those interior offensive linemen are going to go to work, and that'll be big for Ohio State. Then the guys with the ball in their hands running behind those guys got to do something because there's going to be a hole, and then there's going to be a Texas linebacker in that hole. And if CJ Donaldson and James Peoples never win those, never break a tackle, never give a little shimmy, never drop a stiff arm, it's going to be a long day, I think.
So Quinshon Judkins, I think, had 35 rushing yards last year against Texas, and you've never seen a better looking 35 yards.
Yes.
Because 30, I think I mentioned this earlier in the week, 34 were after contact. He was just constantly having to break tackles in the backfield and run through people, run through arm tackles. And it was a pretty impressive display of 35 rushing yards. That we talked about James Peoples' contact balance when we did the draft of the top 22 Buckeyes. That's where this comes into play. Donaldson's a big dude. He should be able to bounce off some tackles too. But I agree with you. I think even with the changeover at defensive tackle, I think it could be some pretty tough sledding to try to run the ball consistently. Just how good and how fast Texas's linebackers are. So if Ohio State wants to have success, it is going to be sometimes you have a game where like running backs just got to find the hole and you're good to go. And sometimes you have a game where the running backs kind of have to make the yards themselves. And I think this could be one of those games.
Yeah. So we have barely talked about Julian Sayin, and we're 40 minutes in. The idea, I am curious about this. If Texas is rushing 4, dropping 7, playing zone, making Ohio State find soft spots, take what's there. Will Howard made some money on some check downs and that kind of thing last year. I think maybe the second most important play of the game was the 3rd and 8 on the go-ahead touchdown drive, where on that one, Texas brought 6, and Will Howard backpedaled and kept himself alive. It was long developing routes, and then found Carnell Tate on 3rd and 8 for like an 18-yard gain. That it was Howard's pocket presence and lack of panic in the moment that made that possible. And I think a lot of quarterbacks in that situation would have dumped it off, would have thrown it out of bounds, would have taken a sack. It might have been Will Howard's best play of the year. Like, it was it
was really good,
poised QB play. And in rewatching it, I thought to myself, what would Julian Sayin do in that situation on Saturday? And it's only an experience conversation. And my main point of information on this is the go-ahead touchdown drive starting from their own 12, 88 yards. Ohio State threw the ball in the first 9 plays. And in a similar situation, in a tight game late, if maybe it's tough sledding in the run game, can Ohio State throw the ball 9 straight times and have Julian Sayin take what's there, make smart reads, soft spots in the zone, keep himself alive to allow a route to develop? At some point in his career, he certainly will do that. I don't know if he'll do it on Saturday.
It's a difficult ask in game 1, but I don't know that it's impossible. If it would just mean his strength sort of like come to fruition earlier. Like, it's seeing the field, it's making quick decisions, it's being accurate, it's taking what's there. Like, I think Will Howard did a really nice job of not. It's always a balancing of like forcing the issue and taking what the defense gives you. And I guess you could make the argument that there, in some moments, Will could have been slightly more aggressive, but for the most part, he kind of took what was there. And I think that was to Ohio State's benefit. And I think Julian Sayin is going to be in a lot of similar spots, unless Texas just says, we're on the road, we got a young QB, we're throwing the kitchen sink at this kid. But I don't know that they're going to deviate from what they do defensively. So I think actually Julian Sayin like might have the poise to handle that. Because I think even like a young CJ Stroud kind of had the poise to handle some of that. And if that's the best comp for Julian Sayin, then I would have a little bit of confidence in his ability to do it. But it's certainly not a guarantee with a guy making his first start. Like, I don't want to make it seem like it's easy, because it's not. And they will definitely try to confuse him, and like the tackles come into play because they're like making calls for the first time, seeing stuff. So like the communication of where's the pressure coming from, who's dropping out, like what's the coverage kind of stuff. Like, it's gonna put a lot on Julian Sayin's plate in his first start.
CJ Stroud didn't complete a pass in the first half of his first start that went more than 7 yards in the air. It was tough sledding, and he forced it maybe a little bit on right over the middle to Chris Olave and threw behind him, and it hit Olave in his hands behind him and tipped in the air, and it was a pick. Will Howard against Texas last year just got antsy early in the second half of like Jeremiah Smith not getting the ball and made a bad read. There are like 3 guys around Jeremiah Smith, and it was the underneath coverage that intercepted the pass. Like, I actually wonder if Julian Sayin is accuracy processing, right? And Texas's plan is to not give up anything deep and make you work. I almost wonder like if that could play into Julian Sayin's hands, because maybe he doesn't have to do anything down the field. You just have to take what's there, and then you have the accuracy, and Carnell Tate and Max Clare are going to be getting open, and Brandon Ennis in the middle of the field, and you've just got to make some of those throws, some of those RPO throws, little play action things, roll out a little bit and take what's there. And I almost that if you can protect enough, keep guys in, protect, and then take what's there, it almost might take pressure off him. as opposed to if you were playing a heavy blitz team that was going to play all man and pin your ears back and be like, hey, if you can beat us, you can beat us, right? Do you know what, like, could the Texas defensive game plan almost help Julian Sayin?
I think it could, and I think like, it would be to Ohio State's benefit to, like, try to embrace some catch and run opportunities for the receivers. Like that was always something last year that I felt like they did not give Jeremiah Smith enough of. There were definitely long stretches in the season where I felt like you can do more things than just throw the ball deep to Jeremiah. And we've seen what he can do when he does get the ball in his hands with some space and how he can blow by people. I don't know that they like embrace that idea enough. So I'd like to see them do it on Saturday. I think they can. I think the defense might invite some of that. And I think, maybe less so Carnell Tate. I don't think he's that kind of guy that's going to like catch a ball and then burn the defense, but I think Brandon Ennis might be. I think Max Clare he's got some good burst for a tight end too. So I think those are the areas where perhaps Ohio State could make a little more hay than it did last year. And I think a lot of that actually does, to your point, feed into Julian Sayin's strengths.
It's funny. Ryan Day was asked about sort of like, why doesn't he script the opening 15 plays as much as like Steve Sarkisian, the Texas head coach, is so famous for? And Ryan Day was saying like, well, we have openers, right? That like we want to try a couple of these things to poke and prod the defense a little bit, see how they're going to play us. But I actually agree with what Ryan Day is saying. Is like, well, why would I know what the 8th play is going to be when I don't know how the first 7 are going to go and I don't know what the defense is going to do? So Ohio State doesn't do that. Yeah. It's like, hey, we're at the 13-yard line, but we called like a double flea flicker reverse as the 8th play, so I guess we got to run it. Right. But last year, Ohio State came out on the first series and went 10 plays, 64 yards for a touchdown. And then when the chips were down in a 14-14 game late, they went 13 plays, 88 yards for a touchdown. I would just like to remind people, if you take out the miracle 75-yard screen pass for a touchdown at the end of the first half, which again, you watch that play and you think to yourself, I'm not sure there's another guy in college football last year who would have scored on that play other than TreVeyon Henderson.
Yeah. When he also like huge Ryan Day tendency to do a slow screen there. Like, I can't believe Texas fell for it.
Terrible. They got, when Trey catches the ball, it's 7 blockers for 7 defenders. And like enough guys made their block, and then there was a hole, a seam that big, and TreVeyon Henderson put on his jetpack and got through it. So take that out. Between the 2 long touchdown drives, Ohio State, 8 plays, 43 yards punt, 5 plays, 14 yards punt, 3 plays, 7 yards punt, 3 plays, -7 yards punt, 4 plays, 27 yards interception, 3 plays, 9 yards punt, 4 plays, -5 yards punt. It's just a reminder that as we think about this battle on this side of the ball, for about 48 minutes last time these teams played, Ohio State's offense didn't do anything.
Yeah.
So
it was the same for Texas's offense. Like but
that's not my side of the ball. That's not my concern, Bill.
I know.
Your concern.
I didn't go through and go drive by drive, but yeah, after Ohio State's opening touchdown drive, there was not a whole lot happening in the first half for either team. Yeah.
So just I don't think there's anybody watching or listening to this who is underestimating Texas. Yes, they lost 7 defensive draft picks. Yes, they lost their great safety and 2 great defensive tackles on their great corner. There's a lot back, and Ohio State didn't exactly have its way with Texas a year ago. So just keep that in mind. And that's even like for your frustration level watching the game. If Ohio State punts 4 straight times against Texas between like the middle of the first quarter and the middle of the second quarter, and you're like, oh my God, this first time starting quarterback, is he the real deal? Like, oh, that's what they did last year too. And then they won the game and won the national championship with a guy making his 40th career start. Like, that's what Will Howard did. So it's just a public service announcement, Bill, just for everybody to have that in their heads as a reminder. I think fans do. I think Ohio State fans do, but I like to bludgeon points.
Yeah, well, I think Ohio State fans are helped too by like seeing the Texas game last year was low scoring and a bit of a slog. Like the Notre Dame games in the regular season were low scoring and a bit of a slog. Like that, I don't know, it just like tends to happen with games like this, and I think it is maybe likely to happen again on Saturday. So prepare yourself for maybe not the most exciting football I've ever seen.
Yeah. Also, you know who is a really good guy to have in a slog game? Emeka Ibuka.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Just like he's like a spy. Like he's just figuring it out. You know, he just figures it out. And I think not that Ohio State doesn't have guys who can do that, but I think you might feel you will feel it, Bill Landis. There will be a play, there will be a moment in the game on Saturday where you will think to yourself, this is an Emeka Ibuka moment.
He was always pretty clutch.
And they'll be like, oh, yeah, he's in Tampa. All right. Yeah. Sorry I went long. That's it. We're not going to be able to get to Bill's side of the ball. We can't get to our picks. That's the entire show. All right. I'm going to kick back and relax. You have Texas offense, Ohio State defense.
I do. I'll give a little bit of the lay of the land to start too. I looked at the ESPN returning production. Ohio State on offense has 47% back, and Texas on defense has 62%. Or excuse me, I'm on the wrong side. Texas on offense has 47% back, and Ohio State on defense has 48% back. 14 players drafted off Ohio State's roster last year, 8 of them on defense, including all 4 defensive line starters. 12 players drafted off of Texas's roster last year, 7 on offense, including 3 of the 5 offensive line starters. So those 2 units are very new, and I think that is maybe like the most interesting matchup here. But we'll start with Arch because I think that's probably where it makes the most sense to begin. I have a thing I looked up about him that I'll lay on you in a second. Like, can we say he's good? Is it okay to say he's good without people getting mad? I know people get mad that people say that Arch is good because he's a 5-star prospect and his last name is Manning. But like, if you watch him play, he's legitimately good. Like, there's a lot there. There are, like smooth, easy throwing mechanics. Like he just, he kind of was built in a quarterback factory, so he looks like he was built in a quarterback factory. He's got a strong arm. He likes to show off his strong arm. He likes to push the ball down the field aggressively. I am very interested to see how much he elects to challenge Ohio State's cornerbacks and safeties downfield in this game, because a decent amount of the throws that he does have under his belt thus far are like 20 plus air yards. He is not afraid to go big game hunting in that way. I thought Quinn Ewers played like a terrible game last year against Ohio State, which helped just like compound some other issues for Texas's offense in that game. They were banged up a little bit too, especially at receiver. So like, this is a different kind of test, I think, entirely for Ohio State's defense, because I think Arch stands a chance to be significantly better in the long run than Quinn Ewers. Whether or not he's there in this start of game 1 of his first full-time season starting is not a guarantee. Just as the same boat for Julian Sayin. I know that Arch does have 2 starts under his belt. He started against UL Monroe last year. I actually thought he was like fine in that game. He threw 2 interceptions. Okay. He was better against Mississippi State, which I guess says something, although I'm not entirely sure how much better Mississippi State was than UL Monroe last year. And if you look at their defenses, they rank out kind of similarly. But he did take a pretty large step forward from the 1 start to the 2nd start last season. Here is the thing that I was curious about that I looked up.
Okay.
Arch has played in 12 games. He has played 260 snaps. He's made 2 starts. Do you know how many snaps he has played in true road games?
8.
3.
Really? Okay.
Against Texas A&M last year. I think he's very good. I think all the draft buzz and conversation about him is warranted, just like based off of his traits. I think he'd be a 5-star prospect even if his last name wasn't Manning. I also fully understand that people tend to get a little crazy talking about him because his last name is Manning. But he's untested. Like, he's not, we don't have a lot of information on him, especially in high leverage situations. And we have no information on him in a situation like what he's going to face on Saturday against Ohio State, which is like just my way of saying that, like, this conversation we just had about Julian Sayin is going to have to work through some stuff. I think Arch is going to have to work through some stuff. And whichever one of the two young quarterbacks can do that the best, team is probably going to win the game. And if your lean is, well, Arch stands a better chance of doing that because Arch has played significantly more than Julian Sayin, even if he hasn't played a ton of high leverage snaps, then that's fine. But these are two young QBs getting their feet under them, and I don't know that it's a guarantee that the guy who's doing it on the road for the first time is definitely going to be the one who plays better.
The Ryan Day has on a couple occasions, and this is more of an intangibles conversation, but brought up that the crowd needs to bring it on Saturday. And a lot of people have referenced, again, the silent count that Indiana had to go to last year. What you're spelling out here with Arch, you think that's a big deal, potentially? Like if the Ohio State crowd can make it tough on him, that affects the game.
Yeah, I think so. He just hasn't had to contend with it yet. I'm sure it was loud for the 3 snaps he played against Texas A&M, but it was 3 snaps. So I think, because even think about like what Indiana was doing there. Like I don't think that Curtis Rourke is better than Arch Manning, but he's significantly more experienced than Arch Manning.
Yeah.
And Mike Kadick, Indiana center, is significantly more experienced than Texas's starting center this year. And those guys couldn't handle it. Right. So I think if Texas gets to a situation, and they couldn't handle it because like Indiana doesn't play in a lot of environments like that. And Arch has not played in an environment like that yet. So I think it can matter a lot. Ohio State had to play on a silent count against Texas last year because there was basically a road game in Arlington against Texas. And I thought that there were moments where it seemed like Texas's defensive line was just kind of teeing off a little bit because once they saw Carson Hinsman get tapped in the leg by Luke Montgomery, it was go time. Ohio State's offense will not have to do that because they're at home, but I think Texas's might. And if they do, then that helps Ohio State's revamped defensive line against the Texas offensive line that's going to have 4 new starters. So I just like it's like a very obvious thing. Of course, it's difficult to play on the road. I just don't know that it's like been talked about enough for this particular game, like just how much of an impact that might have on a basically brand new offensive line and a starting quarterback who's never played in an environment like that before.
I would give Arch has seen it before. Arch has stood in the pocket and looked at a defense, an opponent's defense, and felt all of that. So he's ahead of Julian. Yeah. He's ahead of Julian Sayin there, but this will be the toughest thing he's ever done by far. So you make a good point to that. I did want to ask you. I've been thinking about this a lot. Trevor Lawrence against Ohio State in the 2019 semifinal, when Trevor Lawrence ran it 16 times for 107 yards, had an 11-yard run, had a 16-yard run, of course, had the 67-yard touchdown run. That's been stuck in my head. Like, could Arch Manning have 3 plays where he runs the ball in a way that really changes the game? What do you think of that?
Yeah, I think he could. Like his legs are not his calling card, but like he can move. He's got one really good size that just sort of makes him hard to bring down. But he's quick, and Texas like used him in designed run packages the last 2 years. That was not a consideration for Ohio State when they played last year because Quinn Ewers could scramble a little bit, although by the end of his career he wasn't much of a scrambler because he had gotten hurt so much. There was nothing with designed run with Quinn Ewers, and you're going to get both scrambles and designed runs, I think, from Arch Manning. I asked Caleb Downs a little bit about that on Wednesday night, and he said going into the Cotton Bowl last year, they had prepared for some of that with Arch in case they did put Arch into the game, and they did for one play, and ran kind of like a tricky quarterback run play on 4th and short, but that was the only dose of Arch that Ohio State got in that game. So what they've prepared for this time around in terms of Arch potentially running is not new, but it's just much more of a reality this time around. And Ohio State's got good speed at linebacker. It's got the guys who are on the edges are new starters, but they're not new players, so it's not like they'll be experiencing things for the first time. I think the most interesting dynamic there is Matt Patricia coming from the NFL and just not having to deal with that a whole lot. And what kind of adjustments he might have to make to a heavy dose of quarterback run if that's what Texas decides to do, or if Ohio State gets into a position where it feels like it needs to spy Arch. And I don't know if he's that kind of runner just yet. But But then that's obviously like just like taking a guy out of the defense to account for the quarterback in a way that I think would benefit Texas. So I think that is sort of the unknown element here is how much will they run him, and could that be the deciding factor for Texas's offense? And I think it could be. If Ohio State was like super inexperienced on defense, I would almost maybe bank on it being the difference. But I think they have enough at like with Caleb Downs a safety and at Sonny Styles at linebacker and the guys on the edges who have played a decent amount that they won't be fooled by it, but they have to be ready for it because I do think Sark's going to bring a lot of that to the table. If that's like they've had whatever 6 months to prepare for this game, I bet a lot of time was spent on uncorking new ways to use Arch Manning's legs.
Yeah, I almost think those guys can be the most difficult to prepare for. That he's not a running quarterback, because if you know the guy's going to run, then you're prepared for that. And like Quinn Ewers, if you got pressure on Quinn Ewers, like he wasn't going to do anything with it, right? He was going to try to get the ball out of his hands. Just statistically, Quinn Ewers last year credited with 57 rushes. Again, this is taking sacks and everything into account. 57 rushes for minus 82 yards for Quinn Ewers last year. Arch Manning, 25 rushes for 108 yards. But I think Lawrence is the comparison where it's like, it's not in your head that like he's going to destroy us with our legs, but then all of a sudden you bring a blitz, you play man, defensive backs are turning their back to the line of scrimmage to run with guys. The quarterback is athletic enough to evade the first guy in the backfield on 3rd and 8, and all of a sudden he's running. And now it's a 41-yard gain, where last year against Texas, it would have been a sack. And I just like it's just a difference from Texas a year ago.
It's a big difference. And like I said, like I didn't think Quinn Ewers played that well last year. And the main reason I say that is because like really any time Ohio State got pressure on Quinn Ewers, he dropped his eyes, he stared at the rush, and he got sacked. And I just like Arch is bigger. He's got good pocket presence. There's enough that you see from the games he has played where he's pretty comfortable kind of like sidestepping pressure, resetting and finding a place to throw the ball, or he can just take off and run. So there's a lot of differences there between he and Quinn. I asked Caleb Downs about Arch. I said, like, these time around to get to prepare for a running quarterback. And he said, what do you think? Quinn can't run? And then he laughed. I was like, you know that Quinn can't run.
He said that? He's joking with you about that?
Yeah,
that's good.
Yeah. So that's a major deal here. I don't think like there are going to be moments certainly throughout the game where Ohio State is playing man and has to be careful about not getting burned by the quarterback run. But I don't think they're going to play a ton of man in this game.
Okay.
They didn't play a ton of man against Texas last year, and I think it's just hard with all the shifts and motions and bells and whistles that Sark tries to throw at you. You're better off just kind of sitting back and let it happen in front of you and then rally to the ball. And that's kind of the style that Ohio State played against this offense last year. I think to do that, though, you have to be pretty confident in your ability to control the run game with like just your linemen and your linebackers, and not have to bring extra resources there. So that's I think will be the chess match here. Because Ohio State's defensive line was obviously so good, and I thought really controlled the game last year for the most part. And it's just a tough task to ask these 4 new guys, plus whoever else rotates in, whether that's Will Smith at tackle, Bo Atkinson at defensive end, maybe CJ Hicks. Like, can they control the game in the same way? Now it's against a new offensive line, as I said, so maybe they do stand a chance of doing that. So, but if it gets to a point where, like, if Texas can run the ball with any kind of consistency, I think Ohio State encounters some problems, because then it has to take away from what it's doing on the back end and like kind of like putting a cap over the Texas passing attack. So we'll have to see what that looks like. But because I think like I think the Texas run game could be good, right? Like Quintrivian Wisner, I think it is. Wisner is back at running back. CJ Baxter, who was like their number 2 guy 2 years ago and then got hurt in the preseason before the 2024 season and didn't play at all last year. He's back. That
was a huge story. People were going crazy when Baxter got hurt last year.
So like Baxter and Wisner are a pretty good 1-2 punch at running back. I didn't think Texas was like a great run blocking offensive line last year. And actually, like, the guys who were their better run blockers are the guys who left via the draft. So we'll see what that offensive line looks like. They bring back DJ Campbell at guard, who's a 2-year starter who's played almost 2,000 snaps. He's pretty good. The rest of it's all new. The center is Cole Hudson, who started at guard a couple years ago, but hasn't started since, and now he's moving to center.
Hmm.
The other guard, like, is a third-year guy who hasn't played a ton. Trevor Gooseby, the left tackle, is a redshirt sophomore who started 2 games last year. I think he'll be good, but he's stepping up to a full-time starting role for the
And
first time.
apparently he injured his hand and had a surgery and is maybe going to play in a cast or something.
Oh, really? I didn't see that. Okay, that's interesting. And then the right tackle is going to be Brandon Baker, who's a former 5-star guy who played 65 snaps last year, and he'll be starting for the first time on Saturday. So,
Okay.
if you go by like total snap count, offensive line for Texas versus Ohio State defensive line, Texas has the edge because DJ Campbell has played so much individually. But if you think about it a little more differently, just like guys who have meaningful experience, I think Ohio State's defensive line is actually in a better spot compared to Texas's offensive line on the whole, with Kenyatta Jackson and Caden Curry having played a decent amount. Caden McDonald's played a decent amount. Edric Houston was a pretty important part of the mix toward the end of last season as a true freshman. That's like the most interesting thing. If you like remove the arch component from the conversation, I guess, because everyone's excited to see what that looks like. Revamped offensive line for Texas versus revamped defensive line for Ohio State is maybe the most compelling matchup in this entire game. And I don't know, like, even with what Ohio State lost, like, I might give the edge to Ohio State, or at least like I can at least see a world where it ends up with Ohio State having the edge.
Texas's left tackle was the number 9 pick in the draft. Like, Kelvin Banks is a huge loss, right? That is, when you're trying to figure out Ohio State, Texas a year ago, it's like, okay, well, they have an All-American left tackle. That's a really great place for Texas to start. So who was the right tackle that Jack Sawyer smoked for the scoop and score? Is he back?
Cameron Williams, who was a 6th round pick of the Eagles, I think. But then I also I don't think he made the roster.
Oh, okay. How do you know that? We've been following Philadelphia Eagles 53-man roster cuts by chance?
I have been. Yes. Andrew Makuba made the team.
Nice.
Yeah. So, but like, yeah, to your point, like I think Texas's offensive line was unquestionably way better last year by that point of the season than this line's going to be in game 1. And so was Ohio State's defensive line compared to its defensive line in game 1. But I think the gap might be wider for Texas's offensive line.
Okay.
If that
makes sense. Yeah. Which backfield tandem would you take? Texas's 2 guys or Donaldson and Peoples?
I'd probably, if you're going to tell me that like Baxter is healthy and looks like the guy he looked like 2 years ago, I'd probably take Texas's guys. Because the other thing with them too is they're good out of the backfield, and Sark does a really good job of getting running backs involved in the passing game. Like Texas's 2 touchdowns last year were wheel routes to running backs. One, Sonny Styles kind of got put in a blender. The other one was one of your favorite Jim Knowles play where he drops out the defensive tackles and rushes the linebackers, and there was nobody there to cover the running back, so he scored. So I would advise Matt Patricia to put that defensive call in a trash can, I guess, for this game and not worry about it. But if you look at the targets from last year, like guys who got 50 plus targets, like the running backs are right there with the receivers for Texas. So that is, I think, I don't know if I said this on the show we record or if I just said it in conversation, not on a podcast, but we can talk about Texas's receivers in a second. But I think it'll be far more important and sort of like influential on the game how Ohio State's linebackers and safeties handle Texas's tight ends and running backs in coverage than I think it will be Texas's receivers against Ohio State's corners.
Can I ask you about, doesn't Texas have a tight end transfer that people, that's like a thing? Because Gunnar Helm was a good tight end last year, had a big catch against Ohio State. He was the 7th tight end drafted in the NFL draft, 4th round pick.
Yeah, really good player. They brought in Jack Endries from Cal, who was Cal's leading receiver last year. He's like, there's a group of tight ends that includes Jack Endries and Max Clare and probably Eli Stowers at Vanderbilt and maybe another Kenyon Sadiq probably at Oregon, and maybe another guy that's like someone from this group will be the best tight end in the country. So Endries could be an issue for sure. It's similar, I guess, to trying to defend Helm. And Ohio State has some experience doing that. I was reading though, so Texas played a decent amount of 12 personnel last year. They played it a little less against Ohio State, although they still played it like 25% of the time in that game. Sark seems to really like their tight end room, and like there's like a super interesting mix of guys and skill sets there. It starts with Endries, who can do everything, but he's a big time receiving threat. In a similar vein to Max Clare, I think. They have some other guys that are more like Spencer Shannon is like an inline blocker who's been pretty good and has been around for a while. There's Jordan Washington, who's a sophomore, I think, who's kind of more of a move around, get out in space guy. They have a true freshman named Amari Winston, who's like a 245-pound H-back. He's only 6'1", but he's a tight end. He's 6'1", 245. So Sark, in talking in the offseason, from what I saw, seems like he wants to play a lot of 12 personnel with two tight ends and also have different packages using all those different kinds of skill sets. And I also don't think that Texas is like super deep at receiver at the moment. So that would maybe be to their benefit to play with more two tight end stuff. So I'm super interested to see how Matt Patricia responds to that, because as discussed earlier this week, like Jim Knowles always put a third linebacker out there against two tight ends until the postseason last year, when he kind of stopped doing that. And he didn't do it much against Texas last year. Arvell Reese, who was a third linebacker, only played 6 snaps against Texas. If Ohio State does want to go to a 4-3 against two tight ends, then Peyton Pierce would be the guy that comes onto the field. But because Texas's version of 12 personnel more than likely would always feature Jack Endries as a big time receiving threat, I would imagine that Ohio State probably would stay in its base defense against it and have Caleb Downs or Lorenzo Styles try to cover Endries in those situations, depending on who the nickel is. But that'll be a nice chess match, I think, to monitor, is because Texas will play with 2 running backs at the same time too. So whether they're out there with 2 running backs or 2 tight ends, how does Matt Patricia choose to respond in kind with his personnel? I think will be fascinating.
Should Texas's receivers scare Ohio State at all? Matthew Golden left, was a first-round pick. Isaiah Bond left, wasn't drafted, but had some off-field stuff that contributed to that. He's now on the Browns. Did they replace those guys?
Well, they have 2 guys back. Ryan Wingo, I think, is a player that people know. Wingo he caught a screen pass in that game last year. Made a nice play on it. He's like super athletic and explosive, but I don't actually know like how good of a receiver he is. If he gets the ball in space, it's probably going to be a bad day for you. But I don't know that he's going to be out there like cooking Ohio State's cornerbacks necessarily. He's not, in my opinion, like quite the same player as a Jeremiah Smith or even a Ryan Williams from Alabama, even though those guys were all in the same class and all 5-star receivers. He's a good player, though. He's dangerous for sure. DeAndre Moore is also back. He was like primarily a slot guy last year, but again, productive. Like everyone in Texas's offense is productive. There's a younger guy named Parker Livingston, or maybe it's Livingstone, who played a little bit last year as a true freshman. Didn't have any catches, but I remember even like back in the spring, they were like, this guy is on the rise. So those will be the top 3 receivers. 2 guys back from last year and a young guy who hasn't really played yet. They have a transfer named Emmett Mosley from Stanford, but he's hurt and he's not going to play against Ohio State. So because it's and that there's some 5-star freshmen that they brought in, like Khalil Lockett is going to be a good player, but I don't know if those guys are going to pop in game 1. So it kind of feels like Texas is coming to the table with 3 receivers it feels good about and a bunch of tight ends. And one of the 3 receivers it feels good about hasn't played a ton. So maybe they just ride with Wingo and Moore and play a lot of 2 tight end stuff.
Okay. You think this Texas offense is pretty good or not?
I think it has not quite hit the way people would expect the Sark offense to hit. But I think a lot of that is a product of Quinn Ewers just like not really being that dude. So I think it could take a couple steps forward with Arch as the trigger man. But yeah.
Okay. You want to talk about special teams a little bit?
Sure. I didn't do any special teams research, but I do know that Texas has a good punter.
Okay, so I'll give you a little Texas stuff, and then you can just opine on what Ohio State has there. So this is Texas is probably very significantly better in the kicking and punting game than they were a year ago.
Mhm.
And normally I don't spend a lot of time on special teams, but I think it has a chance to be enough of a difference that it could maybe change the game for Texas. So Jack Bomeister was second team All Big 12 punter for Utah last year. He transferred in. He averaged 45 yards per punt last year. Texas, as a team last year, averaged 41 yards per punt, 103rd in the nation. Just like weren't that good at it. And so they went and got a veteran who's really good at it. I think they were playing a young punter last year. So it's just like a major upgrade at punter. And he had, I think, 13 punts last year of at least 50 yards. I think he has a chance to flip the field a time or two in this game. So I just would like Ohio State fans to be on the lookout for that Joey McGuire for Ohio State. Like I wouldn't be surprised if these teams get in a punting contest for like a quarter and a half, where maybe, it's 4 straight series where it's punt, 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 punt. And I think if that happens, I think there's a chance Ohio State loses that, right? That you end up losing 25 yards of field position out of it. And the result is that helps Texas kick a field goal that Ohio State wouldn't kick otherwise. How should Ohio State fans feel about the Ohio State punting game, do you think?
That's a good question. Joe McGuire can't flip the field. So like that's the one area where Ohio State's a little deficient, I think, in punting. That's why I wonder if they might actually split duties with Nick McClarty, because McClarty does have the big leg. McGuire's really good if you're like from your own 40 or in, about like pinning teams deep. So I think it's fine. I don't think it's great. It's not the best I've seen, certainly at Ohio State, but I think it's sufficient, but I wouldn't call it a weapon.
Okay. I think Bomeister's a weapon. Do you think would you call him a
I think
weapon?
Bomeister's a weapon. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So that's one thing. And then kicker, it didn't really matter in the Ohio State game last year for Texas, but just as a reminder, the Texas kicking situation was a mess last year. The reason it wasn't a big deal against Ohio State is because they benched their field goal kicker before the Ohio State game. Bert Auburn last year was, what did I say? He was 16 of 25 on field goals for Texas, and he was 6 of 14 on field goals of 40 yards or more. Less than 50%.
Yeah.
In the Arizona State playoff game, he missed a 48-yarder when it was tied at 24, and then he missed a 38-yard field goal on the last play of the game that would have won the game, and instead they had to go into overtime to win it. So it was a mess. This was like a thing that was hanging over Texas the whole year, was that their kicker was bad. And so they've tried to address that. They brought in the guy from Texas State. His name's Mason Shipley. He was a 3-year starting kicker at Texas State. He was 15 of 19 on field goals last year, and that included a 60-yarder. So I just think they went to a guy named Will Stone last year for the Ohio State game, and he just made 2 extra points. They didn't try a field goal. But I think Steve Sarkisian probably just wasn't even thinking about field goals going into the Ohio State game. And I think with Mason Shipley, they'll probably be thinking about field goals. And so that's just one of those. Is that good or bad? So now it's a 53-yard field goal on 4th and 6. Would you rather, if you're Ohio State, would you rather Texas go for that? Would you rather they punt it? Would you rather let them try to? I just think that just so Ohio State fans know, I think Texas is probably significantly better at punter and significantly better at kicker. And in a game like this against 2 uber talented teams that are really close, that might matter.
Yeah, it could matter, because I don't think Ohio State's I think Ohio State's a fine punting team. I don't know what to make of Jaden Fielding, if I'm being perfectly honest. Like he missed a couple of gimmies against Michigan last year, and that'll always be in my head. He was better in the playoff, but didn't have a bunch of high leverage kicks, I guess, aside from the last one to kind of ice it against Notre Dame. They did put him into like a bit of a battle this camp. They brought in Jackson Kerrville from Ball State, and it sounds like Fielding won that competition, so he'll still be handling the kicking. But yeah, if it were a game that comes down to special teams, I think I'd probably give the edge to Texas.
Texas lost the SEC title game last year to Georgia in overtime. Auburn was 4 of 6 on field goals in that game. If he's 5 of 6, it doesn't go to overtime. And Texas is the SEC champ, and all the seeding's different. And Ohio State maybe sees Texas in the national championship game, right? I mean, it's just like special teams held Texas back last year, and I don't think it will hold them back on Saturday. Vibes, intangibles, home field advantage, Ryan Day versus Steve Sarkisian. Is there any edge to be found here in things that aren't directly related to the ball being snapped and blocking and tackling and making plays?
I think there's some pressure on Texas to win a game like this. Texas, which lost to Georgia twice and lost to Ohio State, like that, a bit of a narrative on Texas from last year's. They had a good season, but they lost to the 3 best teams. The three games that played against the best teams that played it lost. Not dissimilar, I guess, from some of the narrative that was around Ryan Day prior to last year. I can feel some of that percolating for Sark a little bit, and I think winning a game like this would go a long way in settling some of that. So I could see how that might create some pressure for Texas in this moment. I don't really know that there's any pressure on Ohio State. Like, they're the defending national champs. We all know, with the college football being what it is now, like, they can lose and their season is still very much intact and on track. So I think there's an opportunity for Ohio State to play a little looser in this one than Texas. Texas is in the same scenario relative to the playoff, but with the expectations around Arch and the expectations of Texas being the number 1 team in the country and people picking them to win the national title this year, and then being on the road, I think could lead to perhaps Texas being a little tighter than Ohio State.
You had mentioned something about a Steve Sarkisian, Matt Patricia matchup that you found possibly interesting.
Yeah, I thought it was a Super Bowl. I thought it was the 28-3 Falcons Patriots Super Bowl, but it was actually the year after.
Okay.
The Super Bowl was still Kyle Shanahan as the OC for the Falcons, and then Sark came on the following season. But in 2017, when Sark was the OC in Atlanta and Patricia was the defensive coordinator still in New England, they played a regular season game that New England won 23-7. And I was reading a little bit about that. I guess it was like played in some pretty intense fog that made it playing a little difficult, but also like the Patriots pass defense was abysmal that year. And for some reason, Atlanta didn't try to throw it all that much. And Atlanta ended up with 343 yards of offense, but was awful in the red zone, which is actually kind of something that has followed Sark to Texas. So I don't know how much there is to take from that game. Sark was asked a little bit about it leading into this one, and he didn't seem to put much stock into that one-time matchup mattering so much. But yeah, this won't be the first time that Steve Sarkisian and Matt Patricia have had to match wits.
I know. I think Sark said something about, we'll watch a little bit of Patriots film or whatever, just try to get a vibe on Matt Patricia. But
he seemed to think, and I agree, that what you see from Ohio State's defense on Saturday will more or less look like what it looked like last year. Okay. Are you ready to make a pick in this thing? Sure.
I'm not sure if Ohio State's going to score more than 20. And then, as I think about it, can they win? Is 20 points enough for Ohio State to win? Because they scored 28 last year. One's the scoop and score. One's the 75-yard screen. And then you just think about some of the people in new situations. I think the origin stories, it's a Julian Sayin origin story, and I've made the Stroud comparison. It's an Austin Sareveld origin story, and I've made the Taylor Decker comparison. It's a Brian Hartline calling plays for the first time origin story. And I just think he's going to be better in games 6, 8, 10, 20 than he is going to be in game 1. And the idea that last year, Texas took away Jeremiah Smith. In 2023, Notre Dame took away Marvin Harrison Jr. We've just seen this happen, and Ohio State won both those games. They did. They won both those games, but they sort of needed some extraordinary things to win those games when the number 1 receiver wasn't allowed to dominate the game the way he typically would. And Tim May was kind of asking a question that, like, Ryan Day was kind of like, Tim May was just pointing out the scoop and score, the Travion Henderson. There were big plays that helped Ohio State win last year. And Ryan Day was like, do we need to make big plays? Yeah, I'll tell the guys. Like, we got to make big plays. But there's actually truth in that I think really matters. And if it's not Jeremiah Smith, then I just am a little curious. It could be Max Clare. It could be James Peoples. Could be Brandon Ennis. Of course. But if Texas's goal is to make Ohio State grind it out, and you don't have Travion Henderson shooting like a missile, I just wonder about it. So if I say I'm not sure Ohio State, like 20 to me is that's the threshold. Ohio State scoring 20. Is that enough to win? Does that seem like a crazy thing to you? Are you like, what are you talking about? Like Julian Sayin's going to be fine. Like if I'm thinking about it that way. Okay.
No, I think it's going to be low scoring. I think both defenses are going to make the offenses earn it. And I don't know that I'm seeing either team like getting out of the 20s in this game.
Okay. The over-under is 47.5. I think Ohio State had been a 2.5 point favorite for much of the lead up here. As I look at it now, it's Ohio State minus 1.5.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to pick Texas. And I'm going to pick Texas 24-17. So if Ohio State gets to 20, I think they have a shot. I just think Arch Manning ripping off a run, Colin Simmons getting a strip sack, Texas winning the punting battle. As much as I don't disagree with the idea that maybe Texas has more pressure, they've also got a little bit of the, hey, these guys ended our season kind of thing on their side. Mm-hmm. And I just think there are a lot of very important people in positions for Ohio State who are doing this for the first time. And it's just very hard to be at your best the first time you do something. So
yeah,
the first time that you and Ari and I did a podcast, I planned out, I was like, hey, let's keep it breezy and talk about stuff besides football. And I planned out like a whole bit about sweatpants. Mm-hmm. And if I was coming on this podcast now and doing a 12-minute sweatpants bit, we would have no subscribers. So like I've gotten at least slightly better. I just think we might see the sweatpants bit from the Buckeyes for at least a quarter and a half. And when you're playing the number one team in the country, might put you behind the 8 ball.
Yeah. I think all that is true, if not likely to happen. I'm going to pick Ohio State. So, and I'm a similar low score. I have 24-21. Legitimate concerns about like people in roles doing things for the first time. I don't know that there's like pressure of the moment that can pound that like into mistakes. Mm-hmm. So like I'm like slightly relieved by that assumption when trying to think about like how Ohio State might play in this game and how Patricia and Hartline might call it. I think I have come around to the idea that Ohio State's defensive line has the edge on Texas's offensive line.
Okay. And
when that's the case, and I'm assuming Texas is going to have to go on a silent count and like Arch is experiencing things for the first time. I just don't know. Again, feel free to throw it back in my face if I'm wrong. I don't know that this is Arch Manning fully formed Heisman candidate just yet in this particular game. I think he can definitely get there by the end of the season, but I think he will experience growing pains just in the same way that Julian Sayin will. But Sayin has Jeremiah Smith, who I do think will have a bigger impact on this game. Okay. And I think a little bit more of an X factor in a guy like Max Clare. And I think the thing that would really give me pause for Ohio State is if the secondary was like really revamped, and it's not. So like even the new starter at corner, Jermaine Matthews, has played a lot, and Jalen McClain is new. So he'll be a guy to watch, and Lorenzo Styles is like quasi new at nickel, and I think that's a guy that Steve Sarkisian will try to attack, and maybe Lorenzo Styles won't be ready for it, and that's where Texas can win the game. But I think I'm banking on Ohio State having a little more punch to it defensively than I think maybe some other folks are anticipating right now. So I'll pick Ohio State to win at home. If it was in Austin, I'd pick Texas, but I'll pick Ohio State at home.
Okay. 24-21 Ohio State for Landis. I'm 24-17 Texas. We hope to see a bunch of you back here for a live post-game show on Saturday. We will get rolling like pretty much as soon as the game ends. And I'll be on here from the home office here, chatting up what happened. And then, Bill, we will get you in from Ohio Stadium as soon as possible, assuming the wireless situation does what it needs to do.
Okay.
But we think it'll be okay, right?
Yeah, it should be okay. My plan will be to go to Ryan Day, and then bounce after that and join you, and I'll be able to relay some of what I heard from Day.
Okay. And then Friday morning, we should have a show and podcast up again here on Substack with our playoff picks, our national championship picks, our Heisman picks. We hope to have the YouTube channel up and running for the live show on Saturday, that you would find us there. You would not find that free offering here on Substack. If for some reason the YouTube channel is not up and running, and we're not sure why that would be the case, then we will be here. But that the YouTube channel is the plan, and we're sorry about the logistics. We appreciate your grace on this. And by next week, we will be fully functional with exactly how we want this to go. But that's the plan for now, Landis, right?
That is the plan. And assuming the YouTube channel is up, find either one of us on Twitter. Our handles are here at the bottom of the screen. And we'll also send out a note to everyone on Substack on where to find that too, once we have the link for it. So hopefully it'll be easy for you to find once it's up.
If you found this, we'll make sure we message you in a way that lets you know what the heck is going on for Saturday.
Yeah.
Right. So you're on Substack right now. That's how you're consuming this. So then we'll message you through Substack to make sure we let you know what's up. Okay. It's our first big game breakdown here on whatever. And we're going to have a name, by the way, like on the YouTube channel. It's one of the things we're waiting on is the name and the graphic for the name and all that stuff. So it's a big, exciting reveal for the YouTube channel.
It will be. Yeah. Can't wait till you see our creativity, what the show's called.
Blow your mind. And then it might take, sometimes with the podcast feeds, it just takes a day or two beyond the YouTube channel. And that won't be live, obviously, on the podcast channel. But like, again, as soon as we can get those running, we hope it's by Saturday. That is less of a guarantee for Saturday, but it's for sure by next Monday, we'll have the YouTube, the podcast channels up and running on Apple and Spotify and everywhere else, right? Yeah. Okay. All right. Friday, playoff picks, Heisman picks, Saturday post-game show, Sunday for the paid Substack subscribers, the Sunday sound off, which is your comments and questions even more coming off the Saturday game. We look forward to all of it. We're grateful that you guys are here. For now, he's Bill Landis. I'm Doug Lesmerises. We'll catch you soon.